So we looked at two ways how a Vyper contract can receive Ether, a payable default function or a payable function. But how do we send Ether from a contract? In this video, I'll show you how to send Ether from a contract. The way you will send Ether from a contract is to call a built-in function called send. So for example, let's say external, call this def. Since the built-in function is called send, here I'm going to name my function send ETH. It's going to take in two inputs, receiver will be address, and amount of Ether to send, ETH 256. And to send Ether, we'll need to call the built-in function send. For the inputs, it's going to take in two inputs that are required and one optional input. The two inputs that are required are the receiver, address to send Ether to, and the amount of Ether to send. Okay, and the optional parameter is gas, how much gas to send to the receiver. For this example, we'll keep it simple and then use the default value. And this is how you will send Ether from this contract to the receiver. But at the moment, we have no way of sending Ether into this contract. So there are two ways. We can either declare this function as payable, and now we can send Ether into this contract, and then forward that Ether to the receiver by calling send. And the other way is to declare the default payable function, external payable def default __, and then let's emit the event inside here. So say event, I'll call this deposit with sender index address and amount ETH 256. And inside here we'll log deposit from message.sender for the amount message.value. Okay, so what we're going to do is deploy two contracts, and from one of the contract we'll call send Ether to the other contract, and inside the other contract it will execute this part of the code and it will log the deposit event. And finally, I'm going to declare a helper function so that we can quickly see the balance of Ether locked inside the contract. Say external view def get balance returns ETH 256, and we'll return self.balance. Balance of Ether locked inside this contract. Okay, let's try compiling the contract. Okay, let's now deploy this contract. So we're going to be sending Ether from one contract to another contract. So we will deploy two of these contracts. Okay, so you can see over here we have two of the same contracts. Let's send Ether from the first contract over to the second contract. First, I want to show you what will happen if you try to send an amount. So we will specify some amount over here, but the balance of Ether locked inside the contract is less than the amount that we specified. For example, the current balance of Ether inside this contract is 0. What happens if we say we're going to send one way of Ether, and let's send it to this second contract? Okay, the send ETH function is a payable function. So when we call this function, we can send Ether. But how about we don't send any Ether? And then when we call this function, you'll see that the transaction failed. This is because the Ether balance inside this contract, inside the first contract, is 0. But we're saying that we want to send one way of Ether to another contract. Okay, to make this work, we also need to send at least one way when we call this function send ETH. So let's send one way, call the function transact. Okay, the transaction was successful. Let's now check the Ether balance of the other contract. Call the function getBalance, and it has one way of Ether. So what just happened was we called the function send ETH on the first contract, and it will execute this. For the receiver, we specify the second contract. Inside the second contract, it executed this default function, and it emitted the event log deposit. So let's check the transaction log to see if you can find this log. Okay, inside the transaction details, okay, you can see over here that it emitted the event deposit for the amount 1.